Welcome. We are here to bring you Owocki Standard number 9. And like usual, I'm here with Becky and Jennifer. Say hello, ladies.
Hey,
Hello.
Good morning. Standard number 9, we've gone to the top, right? So, bless Gretchen. She has helped us with the Common Core writing and reading standards, or I should be saying our North Dakota state standards. She has led us in differentiation, and if I had to sum it up, I would say targeted instruction. Basically, she and Jan Richardson are helping us in that area with our least experienced readers and writers. So grades 1 through 5 have been looking at the Common Core standards, primarily the reading standards, the 10 anchor standards for reading that need to be taught through the lens of literature and the lens of informational text type. So today we're going to be focusing on Standard 9. And again, we'll focus on how instruction looks through literature and through informational text. But more importantly, Standard 9 is one of the priority standards, one of the of all the standards that we have to teach. It is an essential that it is emphasized at every grade level, so our kids come out really being able to build conceptual background, being able to contrast and compare. So on the ladder, if we asked you to put the names of the clusters that go from lowest rigor level, key ideas and details, up to highest rigor level, integrating knowledge, I know you'd be able to do this on your own. You were able at the last grade level meeting to identify in 2 words or in 3 words the skills that Standard 1, 2, and now Standard 3. But if we do that with Standard 9, which is way up there in integrating, basically what we're working on is comparison, contrast and comparing of texts, of authors. So what we asked students to do in one text under key ideas and details, we now are asking them to do between texts up at the integrating part. I guess I'm going way back. Sorry about that. Just to see if you're awake, huh? Okay, so Standard 2, you see the 3 words, right? Central idea, theme, and summary. The goal of Standard 2 is to identify that central message or the theme and to show your understanding of the path the author took to get to that point. So again, I bring this back because it's such a model example. In Standard 2, you start with that central idea. In Ira Sleeps Over, it's the idea that this author is teaching how friends accept each other just the way they are. And in analyzing the development that the author uses, you would be unfolding that it is Ira and Reggie that are the main characters. Ira wants to sleep over at Reggie's house, but he's scared. He wants to take his teddy bear along, but he doesn't want to be laughed at. So the analysis of the development and the summary of the key ideas then is using that story grammar of the characters, the setting, the problems, the solution, the plot, to show how this theme was carried out. Standard 9, you also see the word theme in there, but now we're analyzing how 2 or more texts address similar themes or topics to build knowledge, or as we compare how authors approach this. So Standard 9 really is about making connections between texts, between authors, contrasting and comparing characters, settings, themes, topics, plots, genres, and lastly, looking at like an author study, the books that one author writes. So unlike Standard 2, which you work out of one text, in Standard 9, you have to find text sets. And so when we're looking at a common theme, there on the left, we're looking at texts that would be about being different, and how that is played out. So you can compare the characters, their problems, across a theme. If we look at Saving Strawberry Farm and The Gardener, both of those books were written during the Great Depression in America, the 1930s. You would definitely get a sense of comparing settings so that you would know what it was like to live at that period of time. This text set on topics are all going to address what are the stages of the life cycle of a frog. Again, comparing texts, comparing of authors on this one topic. So Standard 9 starts with text sets, and it is primarily about theme among those text sets. So this chart kind of gives a little bit of idea about the variety of themes that we can be contrasting and comparing texts with. I love how if you break down the standard, really this is what we see about the breakdown between reading literature and reading informational text. K5, all of us analyze 2 or more texts addressing similar themes. And that's reading literature. The reading informational text is where you're analyzing how 2 or more texts address topics to build knowledge. And it's only at grade 5 that they are analyzing the text to compare how authors approach and develop that theme. So that breakdown has helped me then to look at, we'll look first at reading literature, and we'll start at kindergarten, 1st grade. So again, we're analyzing how 2 or more texts address similar themes. So Owocki gives us some resources around themes that will support us in starting the instruction in Standard 9. So here's one that I kind of liked. She talked about the theme of friendship across cultures. And at the K1 level, she talked about using The Other Side by Woodson, Henry and the Kite Dragon. And basically, the teacher would be reading them, and the discussion would be comparing and contrasting the adventures and experiences of the characters in the stories. So that's a K1 level. At a 2nd grade level, we're looking at, again, comparing 2 texts, but now it's the same story, just different authors and different versions based on culture. But here, Owocki gives us some of the fairy tales written from different cultures, different authors that we can now contrast and compare. 3rd grade, oh, I love the author studies. You've got it, 3rd grade. So here's taking an author, contrasting and comparing the characters, similar characters, or text from the same author. Now we're not only looking at themes, but we're also contrasting and comparing settings and plots. 4th grade bumps it up into the genre of traditional literature, myths, cultures and whatnot. So again, Owocki gives us suggestions. Here has been a favored book on a collection of Greek myths. So you would compare stories, compare and contrast the treatment of themes and topics across myths. This one is looking at the American Black folk tales, People Could Fly. And lastly, The Keeper of the Animals is from the perspective of Native Americans. But again, you just kind of change that you're working with. And lastly, grade 5 is now looking at genres. So we're looking at biographies, and we're asking kids to contrast, to compare stories around similar themes and topics in one genre. So that's what reading literature looks like, K5. Now, if we look at reading informational text, the goal changes slightly to analyzing 2 or more texts across topics so that we can build knowledge, right? So at a K1 level, it would be where you're going to pick 2 texts that are around the same content area. This is where the integration into our science and social studies matters. You're going to want to pick 2 texts that connect to what you're teaching in your content areas at your grade level. But here's the most basic structure for Standard 9 is what information both of these books teach. Then Owocki bumps it up a little bit, and now we're looking at a true contrast and compare. What do you find in both resources, and what information is unique to individual resources? But I love how she talks about, this is a 2-day a demonstration lesson, and the first day you'd read the one text, and you would be together identifying key elements of the first text, and then the next day you'd be read and identify key elements of the next text, and then you would pick the elements that are the same. So kids really concretely get to see how the texts are the same and the texts are different. So that still is K1. And then getting into 2-3, we're looking again at a couple of texts and how they address the same topic to build knowledge. But now we're looking at it from what are the key points, the important points, and what are some details and examples that support some of those key statements. So again, definitely a bump up. And even though this is second and third, we know with differentiation, it's really not about the grade level. It's about what matches the students' need and that next step in leading their development, right? So grade 4 and 5, really the shift now changes more into integration. So I love this graphic organizer where you first stop and think and record, what do you know already about this topic? Then this is connecting more with 5th grade social studies, where you work with Revolutionary War. These texts are looking at both sides, both perspectives of the Revolutionary War. So now you're going to read the American Revolution. What information have you learned in there that you didn't know before? And again, could you, be identifying key points, key important points, and details and examples that support it, and then, adding another text. Now, the one thing about 5th grade is, I think for informational text, it's more than use, but the whole point in integrating information is that as kids do this, by the end, you should have a rich conversation about what did I learn? What did I learn from these various texts and various authors on this common topic? So in a nutshell, if you're looking at reading literature, the skill is comparing texts and authors. If you're looking at reading informational text, it's contrast, compare, and integration of information. So the last 2 questions basically that teachers have is, what do I teach at my grade level and how do I teach it? So like where we're talking about theme, kindergarten has, with prompting and support, they're retelling familiar stories. 1st grade, you're retelling the stories. They identify the theme. 2nd moves into different genres of fables, folktales from diverse cultures. 3rd grade adds on myths, and now what are the details that are going to explain that central idea. 4th grade, looking at theme for story, drama, and poem, and the ability to summarize. 5th grade is the same as 4th, except it adds a deeper look at the character and the challenges or the speaker of a poem. So when you compare that to Anchor 9, we're still talking about these themes now, but it's across multiple texts. So in kindergarten, it starts again with prompting and support, but you're contrasting and comparing the adventures and experiences of characters in familiar stories. 1st grade, you're doing the same thing, but it's without prompting and support, and it's beyond familiar stories. 2nd grade, you're contrasting, comparing same versions, right? By different authors, different cultures. 3rd grade, you're now looking at comparing and contrasting theme, setting, and plot, but all by the same author, your author studies. 4th grade, you've moved now into more traditional literature. I'll be honest with you, you're looking at the treatment of similar themes and topics and patterns of events. I don't know. I understand the quest. I don't know what other patterns of events exist. These standards get interesting. I need to learn from you 4th grade teachers. And then lastly, in 5th grade, you're comparing and contrasting stories of the same genre. But again, still looking at similar themes and topics. standard 9. Okay, standard, looking at informational text type, again, we can kind of spin off of standard 2 because 2 and 9 are directly related. We're looking with prompting and support in standard 2 at your main topic and key details. First grade takes away the prompting support. Second grade, you're looking at the main topic of a whole piece, but also of multi paragraph of the specific paragraphs within that total text. Third grade, you're determining the main idea you are retelling in sequence, the details and how they support the main idea. Fourth grade adds on summarizing, and fifth grade eventually goes to more than 2 ideas or more main ideas. Okay, so if we look at anchor 9, we're basically just bumping it up to the idea of contrasting, comparing texts, 2 texts on the same topic. So weigh the prompting and support. Second grade, now in informational text, you're contrasting, comparing the most important points. Third grade adds on the key details that support those important points. Fourth grade begins the integration of 2 texts to help present more knowledgeably a subject when you're speaking and writing. And then fifth grade, you're integrating from several texts, again, for speaking and writing about a topic. So we take this analyzing of themes and topics across texts to look at how that's worked with literature versus informational text, and what is the level of rigor that would be at your grade level, above and below your grade level. So here again is the centerpiece for your planning, the learning progression for standard 9, so that all kids are going to be able to move forward in your targeted instruction. And this is the process of identifying how you're going to differentiate. And basically, how you teach this is the same as every other standard from Owocki. You're going to decide if you're working with literature or informational text. The gradual release moves from demonstration to collaborative engagement, eventually to independent application. And the strategy focus that is unique to standard number 9 is making connections, which is all about comparing and contrasting. For reading literature, you're comparing and contrasting settings, characters, events, plots, and themes. And comparing texts when you get into reading informational text is that whole integration that helps then build the depth and breadth of knowledge on a topic. So it starts, I love her as she gives us resources that she already knows works. So this is the recommended literature for comparing and contrasting in kindergarten and 1. And she gives us resources all the way up through 5. So just like every other standard, here you have a list of recommended resources. You look at the kids, what need do they have for instruction? There's your learning statements. And then you begin the demonstration resources, deciding on your teacher prompts, your story maps. You move to the collaborative engagement where you choose from the student activities, and again, the story maps, and lastly, the independent applications. And the process is similar if you're working on the informational text. She has you start with your learning progression. That's looking at the students. Obviously, the texts that you are going to choose are going to be around the integration of your content area topics from science and social studies, okay? But again, planning for the demonstration, planning for collaborative engagement, and then planning for the independent applications where you assess the transfer of standard 9 into their independent level. And there's standard 9. Thank you. Enjoy the standard. You're at the top of the ladder.
Thanks, Becky. Don't forget that when you are finished watching the videos to fill out the Google form, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next set of grade level meetings.